Good evening, everyone. This is Diedrich Martin, Superintendent for Caledonia Community Schools. I'm so glad that you can join us for round two of what I consider a very important discussion. If you remember, a little over a year ago, we had a discussion around a movie called The Social Dilemma. Our thinking back then was just looking at the considerable impact that social media have on our children. Even more so in the midst of coming out of the pandemic. I think a lot of people are starting to realize just how much time we spend online, whether that is on a computer, on a tablet, an iPad, or on a phone. But what a lot of us don't really think about with this incredible ability to access almost anything in the world is the impact that that's having on our children, and particularly teenagers. We grew up, or at least I grew up, in a world where if you wanted to connect with your friends, you had to physically go out to play with them or go to their house, or at best, maybe you contact them on the telephone. Never did you pick up a cell phone and you text them some information, or let alone a picture or several other things. Um, and so while that's a great convenience, it also brings along some challenges that I think a lot of parents don't really think about when we give our kids devices, or give them access to the entire world in a social media sense. So tonight, we wanted to have another follow-up conversation around this important topic dealing with children, mental health, social emotional well-being, and all of those wonderful things. And tonight's movie that we chose was Childhood 2.0. Clearly, with such an important topic, I'm glad to be one of the people who are hosting this and invite everyone here. But we have a outstanding group of panelists who are expert in their field, and particularly have a lot of information and insight into things that we need to think about and things that we can do as we think about our children in the world of social media. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Katie Dorban. She put all this together for us. And so without further ado, I'll turn it over to Katie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martin, and thank you so much to everyone who's joined us tonight, and particularly to our panel. You guys are all giving of your time this evening, and I know we're on the cusp of spring break for a lot of us, so there's lots of busy schedules. So thank you so much for being here. It's my honor really to introduce this wonderful group of people that we have. So first, we have Chris McKenna from Protect Young Eyes, and if you were able to watch Childhood 2.0, he was also a part of that documentary, and he just put all of his resources out in the chat. So if you're interested in looking more at Protect Young Eyes, please check out his website as well as the resources that they have listed in there. It's a wonderful resource for parents and families. Then we have Katie McPherson, who is representing Bark, and as a parent, I use Bark. And I think it's a wonderful tool. Before I handed my kids their device, it was loaded and put onto their iPhones because they're middle school students, and I know that while I want to trust them, they need some guardrails in place. Then we have Catherine Schmidt. She's the owner of Yoga Zen as well as a yoga teacher, and I'm going to mispronounce this, Reiki practitioner, and you can correct me during your time if I've said that incorrectly. And then later on, as soon as he wraps up for the evening, Dr. Mark Steenwick from Pine Rest is going to join us, as well as Stephanie Rogg, who is a Caledonia High School senior and an NHS officer. So thank you so much to our panel for being here. Just a couple of housekeeping things. If you're on as a participant and you would like to ask a question, we are going to be able to address those either at the end or afterwards, and we're going to put out an FAQ. So if you have a question that you'd like to submit in the chat, please go ahead and do so, and we will get to that either at the end if we have time, or we will submit an FAQ to the community afterwards. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and launch our first poll of the evening. And this poll is just asking you a simple question, and you can answer yes, no, or not sure. And the poll is this: are you concerned about the amount of time that your child spends online? So go ahead and take a moment to answer that, and then I'll close it after everyone has a chance to answer. All right, I'm going to give everyone a few more seconds to go ahead and participate, and then I will share the results. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. And according to most of our participants this evening, 86% of you are concerned about the amount of time your child spends online, and we have another 14% that aren't sure. And I think that's really actually probably pretty indicative of a large portion of our community as well. And so with that, I'm actually going to turn it over to Katie McPherson for a few minutes. And I just want to kind of hear from your perspective as someone who works in this arena every day on a national level. What are some of the trends that you're seeing when it comes to technology use in mental health?
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie McPherson. I'm the Director of Professional Development for Bark for Schools. Bark is an artificial intelligence app that monitors and surveils school-issued accounts as well as family accounts, meaning your child's social media, video gaming accounts, as well as G Suite and Microsoft Office 365. So we run in the background of those accounts and alert parents and administrators, counselors at the school level to issues ranging from cyberbullying to predation, drugs and alcohol, depression, anxiety, etc. So trend-wise, we do have a 2021 annual report that'll drop in the chat box. What we really saw was an uptick in depression, anxiety, and self-harm during the last 2 years, and then in our report during 2021 as well. And so prior to the pandemic, we were already in what I would consider a youth mental health crisis and what the research has shown. So I think a lot of people want to maybe blame the pandemic for those things, but we certainly saw that before the pandemic, but we did see an escalation of some of those categories as well. So we're alerting every day, all day long in those categories. We did see an escalation of predation as well during the last 2 years. Interestingly, we saw a dip in cyberbullying in 2021 as students went back to school in person. Looking at, what we have to look forward to and some positive news is that we have more parents that are becoming aware and educated on these topics. Forums like this are bringing much more awareness. We do screenings of the Childhood 2.0 movie weekly, just to bring everybody into the fold. But we certainly, still have some work to do. So trend-wise, that's what we've been seeing over the last 2 years.
Well, thank you so much for that information, because I think that we can feel a lot of that intuitively, but having someone who knows, from the data what they're seeing on a national level, that's really helpful. And I think it's also helpful to hear that to me, that sounds hopeful, right? Because while coming out of the pandemic, there's a lot of things that we're facing. There's also things that you saw that were reason for hope. So I think that's really wonderful. So next, if you don't mind, I'd like to go to Catherine Schmidt. And she is the owner of the Yoga Zen right here in Caledonia. And one thing that I want to just kind of ask Catherine to share is talk to me a little bit about why someone from a yoga studio is on this panel tonight and kind of what you can contribute to this conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Katie. I was really honored to be asked. I'm Catherine. I'm the owner at Yoga Zen. I teach yoga there and I practice Reiki there. And I have a 5-year-old son. So I'm getting close, I think, to being in this world of needing to be more mindful about what he's doing online. And so I appreciated the opportunity to watch the documentary and give myself some education about what I might expect. And when I was asked, I saw links right away about how we can be part of the solution. The documentary shares a lot about what is happening with the levels of anxiety and depression, suicidal ideation, all of that going up. And yoga, movement, mindfulness, I see those as being things that can counteract some of the negative effects of internet and social media and how that's impacting our youth and how it's impacting all of us, quite frankly. And so I see us as being something that hopefully can be a resource in the future to counteract if you're seeing anxiety, depression, things like that in your children and yourself, that you know that there are things, oh, okay, I remember that yoga or practicing mindfulness might be a resource for that. And do you want me to talk about the other part of this question?
Yes. So you mentioned a couple things there, and to a lot of people in the audience, they may have only heard those terms and they're not really familiar with what they are on a practical level. So just your definition of what mindfulness and yoga are and how, and you talked about how those can help people, but just kind of your common everyday definition of those terms.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll start with mindfulness. Mindfulness is a way to describe being aware, basically. I mean, you can practice being mindful about just about anything. Right now, we're in a practice of mindfulness around internet and digital safety. You can be mindful while you're washing the dishes or folding your laundry. I mean, you can bring awareness and attention to whatever you're doing, and that's a practice of mindfulness. But where we see some of the benefits from mindfulness are when we bring our awareness and our attention to our body, our thoughts, how our emotions are impacting our body. Yoga is mindful movement, so it's moving in a way that is aware. And yoga also includes mindful breathing. So when we're focused on our breathing patterns, that's when we start to see some of the benefits. And some of the benefits, when I say that, what I mean is, so yoga has been around for thousands of years. It originated in India. We've all, kind of heard, okay, yeah, I know yoga might be good for me. Maybe I'll stretch and become more flexible. But really, yoga is about creating flexibility, not only in your body, but in your mind and in your awareness. So when you're practicing yoga, you're practicing being aware of what your body is doing, how you're moving, and how you're breathing, essentially.
Thank you. That was just a perfect definition, and I could really get a great visual of what you're talking about as you were speaking. So thank you. And with that, we're actually going to hop back. Stephanie Rogg, our student representative, was having a little bit of a difficulty joining the meeting, but she's on now. So I do want to hop back to her question really quickly and just hear from her perspective as a senior in high school, what she sees as, what's going on with herself and her peers in terms of technology. Is it more helpful or harmful? So Stephanie, if you're able to unmute and put your video on, we'd love to hear from you about what you feel from your perspective is going on with technology and you and your peers.
Can you hear me?
We can. You're doing great.
Thank you. So I personally view technology as an asset. The online world is like continuing to grow in practicality and popularity. So for me, phones and computers are really helpful ways to keep up. And with them, like my friends and I have access to schoolwork, family communication, the Remind app, group projects, pictures of assignments, and it simplifies the process of checking grades, and having everything in one place is highly convenient, like especially in the fast-paced life of like high school students. But like I do agree that technology is only as effective as you make it, and it definitely can have like adverse effects on teens.
That is so well said. Thank you, Stephanie. I think one of the things we want families to hear tonight is that technology can be a wonderful tool. And really, I think what students need are some guardrails and then some other protective factors in place to help them navigate this world. And the resources that we're sharing tonight, I'd like you guys to think about them kind of like a safety net. We want it tied at multiple locations. So we want some internet monitoring going on to help your students, to incorporate physical activity and movement into their lives. The support of mental health professionals, and all of those pieces are kind of like that safety net that really help to protect our students. So next, we're going a little bit out of order, but thank you for your flexibility. I want to move on to my next question for Chris McKenna from Protect Young Eyes. So one of the areas that the documentary addressed is the amount of mature content on the internet, and it was staggering, the numbers that they shared. What is the psychological impact of the access to mature content at a young age? And then the second part of that is, how can we open up the door to talk to our kids about what they see and hear online?
Yeah, so I'm the guy that's here to talk about pornography. I'm not afraid to talk about it. Let's just talk about it. I think that's the best way to handle this issue, because anything in secret, especially, if you're a young person, it's just a corrosive thing. So for us, this issue is one that is different than my growing up, where explicit content used to be a destination. And it was something you sought after because it was somewhere else. We now live in a world where pornography seeks us. And that's a radically different world to grow up in. And so what I often say to parents is, it makes no point to say to a child, well, when I was growing up, because it just doesn't compute. It's apples and oranges. Now, what I don't want any parent to do after this conversation or watching the movie, and Stephanie, this will be music to your ears, I don't want any parent to go and smash their kid's phone. That is not a productive way to build those bridges of digital trust that are necessary, whether it's about how you're thinking or feeling or explicit content, whatever it is. I want us to seek ways to build trust and conversation with our kids, especially around the issue of pornography, because what's so complicated about this issue today, Katie, is that porn used to live in places that were separate from the good places in my life. I had to go down the road to Matt Carlson's house, to the magazine hiding under his mattress, just talking for a friend. And that would be the spot where you had to go get it. It lived in other places. Now, what we've done is we've given amazing students Chromebooks or iPhones or an Xbox even, and all the things that are intended to have this purpose also are just singular clicks away from content that can radically change the trajectory of their life. And also, when you look at what its impact is during this especially formative neurological time, right? The brain is going through all kinds of massive, amazing changes during this time. And the things, what we say at Protect Young Eyes is the brain, for all of its complexity, operates according to a very simple principle. Whatever I feed my precious brain is what it learns to love, especially before age 16, right? And so when I talk to parents and, I'll say to them, hey, raise your hand if you have issues. Of course, every parent raises their hand, right? We all have issues. Where do those issues come from? They often come from childhood, from something that happened or didn't happen to us. And we live at a time where the probability of traumatizing experiences, I believe, is more greater than ever. There's a thinness that exists between childhood innocence and life-altering experiences, all from things that we've given kids in the spirit of protection and safety that also can do these things. That's what's so complicated about growing up today. And so with this issue, like any other, I'm all about talk about it. I make parents go through an exercise of, my note and my parent presentations, write down the age when they should start talking to their kids about pornography. And of course, someone writes down an age and then I tell them to cross it off and subtract 2. And that's probably the right age for them to begin that conversation, because I want years of you parents in amazing Caledonia, years of your ideas about what their reaction should be long before they see this, because it can, and this is more, Mark's space and others, but I could point to all kinds of stories of parents who, after a child has had an exposure to certain types of pornography, it is trauma to their brain. It is nightmares. It is radical changes in their behavior. It is an experience that leaves a mark that, as a young person who was exposed to this, I can tell you that I counsel hundreds and hundreds of adults on this issue, and I've never spoken to an adult who can't tell you exactly the first thing they saw if they've struggled with porn at any point in their life. And that's two-dimensional magazines, VHS tape stuff that is nothing like the content that is on the devices that we're handing kids today. So yes to protections, yes to conversations, yes to all of these loving guardrails around our kids who are growing up in a time where they're always towing the line between where the technology is awesome and where technology is awful. And I just want us to embrace that reality and speak loving and openness with our kids, knowing that that's the world that they're growing up in.
That was so well said. Technology is terrifying and wonderful at the same time. And I know that, Katie, you're going to share a little bit later about how Bark can help parents, but one of the ways as a parent who uses Bark that, you know, it opens up the door to conversations is when I do get alerts about different things that could potentially be threatening or could be harmful to my child. It's not a matter of, you know, I saw this and I'm so upset. It's, you know, can you tell me more about this? Can you let me know, you know, where this came from or kind of how you got introduced to this? We have great conversations about it, and it's actually led to some wonderful teaching moments with my kids. And I think that was part of the intention of the program. And I know this isn't just about Bark, but it's one of the ways to open up those pivotal conversations and then also to protect your kids as they you know, navigate this online world. And my kids are, you know, my oldest ones are in 7th grade, and they're still at that point where they're not 100% sure how to make good decisions. And so it's one way that I can have those open conversations with them, and that's very, very helpful. So Chris, thank you so much for your insight into that. I think that that is really powerful. We're going to go back to Stephanie for a moment, our wonderful student who is willing to be a part of this conversation. And I just want to ask you this, Stephanie. So the documentary points out that when we constantly interrupt, or when young people constantly interrupt their boredom with a screen, and you know, with the distraction of a screen, that it kind of reduces our ability to deal with difficult feelings and emotions and kind of to be alone with our own thoughts. Do you see that in yourself? Do you see that in your peers?
Personally, no. I think it might also be an age thing, and like plus I'm in the bubble, but I also kind of think there's more playing into it than just like the presence of technology, because like the world around us, like with the pandemics, Ukraine fighting for like freedom, possible talk of a world war, the climate crises, and then like the added stresses of just being a teenager. There's so much, like we need a distraction to keep us sane, I feel like. And for some people that might mean like pulling out a phone to like scroll or listening to music. Maybe for other people like reading. But like from what I've seen in my friends and experience like as a teen, I don't necessarily blame the phone or like technology. I think it like provides more of like a sense of familiarity or comfort in like a chaotic world rather than a distraction. But like I also agree that it could be considered a distraction, because then like you're taking away time from yourself to like replace it with that.
Very well said, Stephanie. I think it's a balance, right? And I think most of us realize that technology isn't going away. So we do have to try to figure out a way to navigate it in a way that's healthy and make sure that we stay at a good place and be self-aware to know, like, is this helping me or is this hurting me? So with that, I'm going to launch our next poll. And this one is just a little bit different than the previous one. And it's basically asking this. Have you ever seen a change in your own mental health or the mental health of your child related to technology use? And I'll just give you a minute or two to answer that question. All right, I'm going to go ahead and end our poll here and share the results with you. So almost all of you, 94%, said yes, enthusiastically. I have seen a change in myself or in my child related to technology use. And a few of you said no or not sure. But I think that's really intuitive to us, that we can tell that sometimes, you know, there's benefits, and then sometimes there's changes that aren't good that go on with our mental health related to technology use. So thank you for participating. Next up, we have Catherine Schmidt again. And one thing that I believe so strongly in, because it's really helpful for me personally, is that physical activity is a protective factor. But I want to hear from you. What have you observed in terms of the connection between the health of the body and mental health?
Yeah, great question. And I've seen a lot of connections between physical health and mental health. The word yoga is a word that means union. And so we are under the impression that, any sort of input into your system, into your body, is going to impact the whole system. So the food that you eat, that physically becomes your form, that has a part to play in your overall health. The news that you read or the things that you're looking at online, those all have an impact on your mental health. The shows that you're watching, things like that. I mean, all of that, anything that you're consuming in some way is going to impact your overall system. And just a quick story about a yoga class that I took a few years ago where the teacher asked us to be considerate, to be mindful of, thinking about your TV or really any sort of screen, it can be computer or phone, as another entryway into your home. And if you're inviting that person into your home through your screen, you might consider, is this actually a person that I would open up my door to and invite into my home in real life? Even though it's not a physical interaction, it's an energetic interaction that plays a part in how we feel. And I gotta say, after that class, it changed the way that I felt about the Real Housewives shows that I was watching. And so I think that, yeah, those sort of inputs have all sorts of impact. And our physical health impacts our mental health. If our body is chronically in pain or tired, that impacts the way that we think about our body, about our life. It impacts our emotions. Our emotions create physical shifts. So when we're feeling anxious, we feel that in our stomach or with sweaty palms or sweaty armpits. We have physical reactions to things that are happening mentally, and vice versa. So it's all connected and all impacts our health in some way. Any sort of movement is going to be helpful to your system. When you think about, am I consuming more stillness or consuming more movement? That is, something really important to consider, because the more that we move, the better our immune system functions, and the better our hormone system functions, which impacts our emotions and how we're feeling.
That's really great insight. Thank you, Catherine. I think intuitively a lot of people feel that, but being able to hear from you is really helpful in that arena. So thank you. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Mark Steenwick from Pine Rest, and he's here tonight to weigh in, just on healthy practices as a family. But one of his specialties is something called dialectic behavioral therapy, DBT for short. And we're not going to get into the specifics, but one of the things that DBT teaches, one of the skills that they focus on, is something called distress tolerance. And that can be challenging when students constantly have their phones for distress tolerance, and they use that as a bit of a coping mechanism. And then when that's removed, they can feel somewhat overwhelmed. So I just want to hear from Dr. Steenwick just some strategies that parents can use to help their child with this skill at home.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Katie. So there's a lot to distress tolerance skills within the DBT model. One of the core set of skills that we teach is kind of goes by the acronym of TIP. And so the T stands for temperature, or tip the temperature. One of the things that we know about the body is that it responds to cold, especially kind of exposure to cold water in the face. And so we can really activate what we know as our parasympathetic nervous system, which kind of calms the body down, gets us into a state of less arousal if we're really activated by exposing our face, our body to cool water, to cool temperature. So even putting like an ice pack on your head or on the back of your neck, that can certainly be a way of calming the nervous system down. The I in TIP stands for intense exercise. So kind of piggybacking off of what Catherine was sharing, getting the body activated is helpful generally, but if you're engaging in intense physical activity for a short duration of time, that's again a way of kind of releasing some of those stress hormones that get built up when we're getting activated and we're getting into those distressing emotions. So doing jumping jacks, running up and down the steps really fast, running around the house a few times, getting out on the bike for the kids, just some way where they can get their exercise, their blood pumping, their body moving really fast for a shorter duration of time. The first P in the TIP is for paced breathing. A lot of people have heard about the skill of deep breathing before. This is very similar to that. The kind of main little wrinkle with paced breathing is this idea that we want to extend our exhalations versus our inhalations. So our inhalations are actually activating for us. They kind of activate more of the sympathetic nervous system, where our exhalations are stress reducing or activate our parasympathetic nervous system. And so if we can pace out our inhalations to be about 2/3 of the length of our exhalations, then we're going to do a better job of activating that parasympathetic nervous system. So paced breathing is the third P. And then the fourth P is progressive muscle relaxation. We often carry a lot of stress and tension in our body, and we can feel it in our shoulders or our chin or our legs or wherever. And a lot of times we don't necessarily even realize or see that too consciously. But if we kind of take a moment to slow down and just kind of go through our different muscle groups very systematically, often we start from the feet and kind of hold a muscle group like our calves and then our thighs and just kind of clench them tight for about 5 seconds and then just kind of slowly release it. We can start to notice some of those the tension that we might be carrying unconsciously start to release. So those are some of the DBT skills that we work with the patients that come in to see us to help them deal with a lot of the distress that people experience in life.
That is super helpful, Mark, and thank you for putting it in such simple terms, because I think most of us at home, have access to these things, which only one of them actually requires any sort of material, but being able to know that exposure to cold can activate the parasympathetic nervous system, and then intense exercise and activating your paced breathing, and then using some progressive muscle relaxation. And those are all really helpful tools. And something just to keep in mind is that we can practice those with our kids. Because some of the best behaviors are caught rather than taught. And so, even my middle school boys, I make them do super nerdy things at home. And I'm like, I know, just do it with me. It's fine. And I find them sometimes using them when we're not together, even though they think it's kind of dumb in the moment. And so I think that that's something that we can really help our kids with at home. And those are really practical strategies. So thank you, Dr. Steenwick. I really appreciate that. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Katie McPherson and Chris McKenna to kind of share what are some of the guardrails that we can put in place for young people in our lives. Katie, if you want to start, and then if you want to answer the next part of that, which is how can BARC help parents at the same time, or if you want to take that afterwards, because it's kind of a big piece of that puzzle, that would be great.
Sure. I'll let Chris, he has an action plan for all families, so I'll let him tackle that. But from the standpoint of just having some sort of supervisory app, and if it's BARC, great, but I would love for all families to have something. There's no mystery to our students' lives. Everything you want to know about your child is either on a desktop, an iPad, their phone, their video game platform. Like all of the gold is there. And so using a supervisory app that monitors and supervises for you really takes, the hard work and the heavy lifting out of it. And as you said, I use Bark, you use Bark. I have 4 girls that are 13, 14, and 16. And so as the alerts come across, I get to choose, like, this is a behavioral insight into what's going on in the friendship group, between classmates, or even strangers, right? So I get to choose whether or not I'm going to approach those topics. By and large, most of the time, I don't approach many of the alerts that I get. I just use those as sort of intel for myself to keep tabs on what's going on. But the ones that I do intervene on are safety issues. And they could range from somebody who's dabbling in drugs and alcohol, stealing, something out of the parent's home, to cutting, to suicidal ideation, and true safety issues. So for me, part of the plan, and Chris will talk about the rest of the plan, is really take the heavy lifting out of it for you, like have some sort of supervisory app, but also know that you are the best app, right? The relationship and the open communication that you have with your children can trump any technology any day. But working in tandem, you've got like a double whammy, right? And so for me, it's really about how do I keep tabs, especially if you have multiple children, on just the pulse of how my child's doing and how the friendship group is doing. I think that's half the battle. So I'll let Chris, tackle the rest of the action plan, because he has some really great things to share.
Thanks, Katie and Katie. I'll jump in. Bark is a wonderful tool. It's one of many. I've promoted Bark for years, but and I'm going to just kind of read directly from an Instagram post that I put out that says,
Hi, Dad.
Grant, I'm going to talk.
Where's my tablet?
It's in the living room. Okay, sweetheart.
It's not in the living room.
I'll be done in just a minute. Okay, love? Okay. It's 2022. This is what happens, right?
I love it.
I swear Grant invented Zoom bombing. So there we go. But the post was, use parental controls, but use them gently, like a caring hug and not a cruel hammer. And I just want to kind of read what I put. This was a caption under an Instagram post. It said, we don't use parental controls so that we can catch our kids doing something bad. We use them to prevent the internet from doing bad things to our kids. This might seem a subtle shift in words, but I think it's a monumental shift in mindset. It's not an us versus them situation, but an us with them situation. We're rooting for them. We want them to succeed online. Let's tell them this. Remind them that we always put boundaries around powerful things, weapons, drugs, etc. Boundaries for adults and kids. These are things that can be used for good, but can also be used to do great harm. Technology is no different. So start young. Ensure that no child holds anything connected to the internet unless it is filtered and monitored in some way. And we make sure that they're aware of this, because digital spying doesn't teach our kids anything. It only forces them to become digital ninjas. And if parental controls are good for them, then moms and dads, what tech boundaries would also be good for you? Parental modeling is maybe more powerful than any parental control. And then I go on to share some resources. But I think we do have a framework called the Digital Trust Framework. We've written about it in our social platforms and on our website. But the number one thing in our framework is copy me. In other words, amazing children of mine, Lauren, Cole, Blake, and Grant. If I don't want you using technology just like me, that's a problem. It starts with us, moms and dads in Caledonia. So that is intended to poke a little bit, because I think it's easy for us to think that technology is a kid issue. It's a human issue. These are algorithms that will find out anybody, whether you are 4, 14, or 40, it will find you. It will find your weakness, whether it's porn or gambling or fantasy football or shopping or whatever it is. It will find you and it will exploit you. They are intended to exploit. When I see amazing young people who can't put TikTok down, or amazing young people who can't quit, Snapchat or whatever it is, I look at their parents and I say, I hope you understand that if these existed when you were a kid, you would be doing the exact same thing, right? Teenage brains aren't any different in 2022 than they were in 1988 when I was a freshman in high school. The only difference is what parents are giving them. That's the difference. And so we need to lead the way. We need to prepare them. We need to do the hard work. And you can. I'm not trying to heap burden and all kinds of to-dos on top of parents who already feel busy and overworked. That's why Bark and Protect Young Eyes and others are here to carry that burden of research and information for you. But make no mistake, it starts with you. So lean on those that can help. Awesome. I mean, it's awesome that you are in a school district that is having these conversations. This is not common. So this is great. Lean on the resources at the schools that are there. So, student support services, they're there to help. So that's what I would say in terms of coming alongside, creating those guardrails, creating a foundation of relationship. Because if you want to go toe to toe with a kid with parental controls, you will lose every single time. You've got to start with the relationship and the connection before you think you're just going to win with protection.
Yes, 1,000% to everything you said. I think so many times we have to remember, especially with our own children, that we do have to earn the right to be heard in a lot of ways, even though we are their parent and we pay the bills and all of those important things, but there's nothing that trumps that relationship with them. And with that, Katie, I'm just wondering if you could give parents an overview, a quick overview of what Bark looks like and how parents can use it, and what kind of, support is available if someone wants to start using that with their kids.
Sure. You're welcome to check out our website, bark.us. So as I said, we have a schools product and a family product. So for families, parents would opt in to the subscription. You would have your login and password for each of your children's accounts, and then you would sync that with your device. So as you start using the product, you would be alerted to any of those 17 categories that I described. So it's an opt-in and it's a subscription for the whole family. So typically with the 20% discount that I'll offer tonight is typically about $12 per month, and that protects the whole family. So if the school is using it in tandem, school issued alerts, depending on the school district, are also allowed to be shared with parents. So some of our children are pretty savvy and have determined like, oh, my parents are monitoring my personal device, so I'll go over to my school issued Google Doc account and do some funny business or use this as a different type of tool. In addition to that, on the front of school safety, we have seen children using Google Docs and other types of G Suite type products to talk to each other, trade in appropriate photos, et cetera. So those alerts would also go to parents if the district decided to share those. So on both sides of the house, we believe it's a shared responsibility between schools and families. But for the family product itself, it's an opt-in subscription. And I'll be happy to drop in the chat or you can send out via email, as I said, that 20% off discount code for that as well.
Thank you. And would you mind just listing quickly some of the platforms that Bark does help parents monitor?
Yeah, oh my gosh, there's over 150.
Yes, so don't name all of them, but just maybe some of the big ones.
The top ones, Discord, text messaging, email, Instagram. We do have limited capability on Snapchat, and that is a Snapchat type issue. That is a bigger conversation. But most of the, TikTok, the heavy hitters that kids are using a lot, Pinterest, any of the things that younger kids, Roblox, might be into as well. We alert on those platforms as well.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And now we're going to switch gears just a little bit. So, Catherine, it's been brought up a couple times tonight, actually, about how big breathing is for our mental health and emotional regulation. So how do the skills that you teach help young people better manage big emotions? And how can parents help their kids at home? Or what other resources do you have available for parents?
Yeah, no, I'm so encouraged to hear that like breathing and relaxation and acknowledging that movement and stuff like that is being used in a therapeutic setting. That's incredible. I love that. So yoga, a typical yoga class includes opportunities to build strength in your muscles, flexibility in your muscles, gives you a chance to practice mindful breathing and mindful relaxation. So for all of the time that yoga has been around, it's really only been recent that scientists have started to study what's going on here, why is this sticking around, why is this helpful? And honestly, there's still a bit of mystery about why yoga is helpful, but ultimately its main benefits come in the form of activating the relaxation response and reducing inflammation associated with stress. So participants that have practiced yoga see a decrease in their stress hormone, their cortisol levels go down, and then they see an increase in their feel-good hormones like oxytocin and serotonin. Yoga also helps increase melatonin, which is our sleep hormone. And so people that are regularly practicing yoga, mindfulness, things like that, see an increase in their sleep quality. And when we sleep better, our body is able to repair and heal and get into that relaxation state and do the healing that can only come when we're in a relaxed state. And so, we see anxiety, stress, all of these things going up. I don't know if it's related to the internet necessarily or social media. I can see links, certainly, but certainly those things are going up in our kids and us. And taking the time to be mindful helps slow things down, helps us be better aware of how our emotions are reacting in our body or how our body's responding to those emotions. And it helps us all build emotional resilience and agency. Usually when we have some sort of big emotion, we feel kind of out of control. And when we are practicing mindfulness, we have an understanding of, all right, sometimes I feel like this, and then sometimes I feel like that. Even though this might be painful and difficult right now, I know that maybe in a few breaths I'll feel different, or in a few minutes I'll feel different. And we start to see how our body works and have some better compassion and understanding for it. Now, kids yoga is one thing that honestly, I think the pandemic has helped increase. Parents are seeing, okay, I do need to do something with these kids, or at least put them in front of a screen in a way that's helpful for a few minutes while I go change the laundry. And so YouTube has a ton of free kids yoga and mindfulness resources out there. For younger kids, there's something called Cosmic Kids Yoga, which many people might be familiar with. For older kids, I would say preteen and up, they could probably do some beginner adult type classes and they would do just fine. Yoga Zen certainly has classes for kids and adults, and we are growing that group of kids who want to move in a way that's non-competitive, that is affirming and empowering. You don't have to be flexible to do yoga. There's sort of a saying that if you can breathe, you can do yoga, because really our main focus is awareness of what's happening with our mind, our thoughts, and trying to build strength and flexibility to manage those. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And I feel really lucky to live in a small community with a business like yours here. It's not everyone who has access to that in a small community. So that's really wonderful. And with that, I'm going to go to Dr. Steenwick for a few minutes. And I just want to know, kind of as a parent and a mental health professional, and you're a parent in this community, what are some general strategies that parents can use at home to promote an environment where kids can thrive? There's a lot of complicating factors, and sometimes it feels a little scary.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be a really difficult thing to do. And, certainly as a parent, myself, you're going to make mistakes and not always hit all the right notes. But I think that in general, the more when we can normalize kids' emotional experiences and let them know that big emotions, any emotions aren't bad. They're not scary. They're not dangerous. They're not things that we need to hide from, run away from in any way. But the more that we can just allow our emotions to be present, and that's kind of piggybacking off some of the mindfulness stuff that Catherine and others were talking about there, the more comfortable they'll become and able to tolerate whatever comes their way emotionally. So more that we can kind of just help them to curiously observe and be aware of their emotional experiences. As parents, I think that we can play a role in helping our kids notice when there's tonal shifts or body language changes in the way that they're acting or responding, and maybe say, when I notice my shoulders going up and feeling tense like that sometimes means I'm angry. I wonder if that's how you're feeling right now. So the more that we can kind of own our own emotions and be okay with them and not treat them as something scary, that certainly can be helpful. Consistency, I think, is really a big part of effective parenting and raising emotionally healthy kids. So I think as much as we can, having I know there's so many different activities and things to juggle all the time, but as much as you can, having a consistent time where you guys are together as a family, whether that be at a meal time, being able to talk about the day and share things that are going on, having a consistent bedtime routine, having a consistent wake up time. Just these routines are things that I think we all thrive on, and we kind of don't necessarily recognize their importance as much as maybe we ought. But I think kids especially really need that routine and that consistency. So the more that we can provide that for them, and if that means like we, give up a activity or two, or an outing out that maybe sounds like it would be really fun and exciting, maybe sometimes that's a better thing to do for our kids and their mental health, and frankly for our own mental health too. Spending time outdoors, I know physical activity and outdoor time is mentioned, but that certainly can be a really valuable, important thing to encourage and affirm for our kids. I know my son is super into football, and so just tossing that football outside with him all the time and just allowing him to run around and do his thing, and that's a great outlet to be able to get out and just enjoy that outdoor time. Hopefully we'll have a little bit more warmer weather in the near future to enjoy more of that. And I think this has also been mentioned already, but modeling, as parents, we need to model not only the relationship with technology that we want our kids to see, but the relationship with each other that we want our kids to be able to have. So being able to model the type of communication that we would want them to have with their peers, with their romantic partners, modeling that with your partners, modeling that with your friends and other family members. The more that they're able to see healthy interactions, the more that they're able to see healthy ways of dealing with and resolving conflict, that is going to be things that they pick up, and they are going to be able to adapt and apply to their own lives. They're going to be a lot less interested in being told what to do and more interested in seeing how it's done. So I think those are just a few things that can be really helpful for us to, as parents, pass down and help just gently nudge our kids in healthier directions.
I love that. And I think it really goes along with the idea of, we're not talking about eliminating all the bad things from your kid's life and eliminating all access to technology, because that's just not realistic. But we're talking about what kind of good things we want to build their life from. So we want them to have time outside and time with their family and opportunities to resolve conflict and communicate in a healthy way. One of the things that I always say is one of the best gifts that you can give a dysregulated child, so a child who's going through some hard things, is a regulated adult. And that takes all of us to be able to practice these skills of, self-awareness and mindfulness and all of those things, because that's really where our kids are going to glean that from. So thank you for that insight, Dr. Steenwick. And to end our formal portion of the questions, I want to turn it over to Chris McKenna again, and just understanding that we have parents listening tonight who might have kids who don't have really access to technology or their own devices yet, but we also probably will have parents either here tonight or who will be listening to this in the future who will say, man, I want to make some changes. And maybe we've already rolled something out, but I would like to make some changes to the way that we approach technology. What advice would you give to parents tonight who are in that scenario?
Yeah, so if you joined late or maybe didn't hear it, number one, don't go home and smash anything. You can't do that. That doesn't help. But I'm a big fan of going home and talking openly and honestly about all the things that we're concerned about, right? If we put it out there, then we can deal with it. If you go home and you now have a concern that your son or daughter might run into something inappropriate online, then I'm a big fan of looking at your amazing sons and daughters and saying, honey, I gave you this smartphone. I'm not going to take it away. I mean, I gave it to you, but I've learned some things about it that I'm concerned about. Here's what they are. And how can you help me now mitigate some of that? I'm constantly looking at these conversations and these situations, Katie, in terms of risk. That comes from my previous job as a consultant. My job was to mitigate risk, but it's the same way with my parenting. I can't bubble wrap my kids and prevent all risk and harm, nor would I want to, because that would turn them into completely wimpy adults and they wouldn't know how to deal with the world, because the world is hard. But at the same time, I want to remove egregious harm from their life. And where I have concerns that I can't maybe do that as well as I want to, then I want to invite them into that, especially if you've got older kids. Anytime a child or an adult has agency in the situation, ownership, invite them into solutions. If you don't know how to fix it, or if you're concerned, we have a reel out on our Instagram that is, tell them everything you're afraid of. And I basically go through and I invite parents to lay out their digital fears in front of their kids and invite them into helping come up with solutions. Again, it's that me with you, me for you. I want you, amazing child of mine, to use technology in a good and positive way. And maybe as mom or dad, I don't always know the right answer or the right way to do that. You help me figure this out so that you can become, a young adult someday who uses technology well without me, right? That's our goal, is we want them to figure this out without us eventually. So that's the spirit, a spirit of curiosity, a spirit of openness, a spirit of honesty, controls where necessary. But those are some of the words that I hope characterize the conversations that come out of a conversation like this. I don't want us to slip into fear and condemnation and spying and control. Those are things that a teenager can smell a mile away, and you've lost as soon as they smell it. So they're just not going to be helpful. So those are some things that I would say. And if you don't know where to start, my gosh, it's easy to get paralyzed and not know where to go. Totally get that feeling. All parents do. So reach out. I mean, literally, I'm in your backyard. Here I'm in Caledonia as a national expert on this topic. Reach out, send me a DM, send me an email. If you don't know how to get a hold of me, then ask Katie or someone in leadership, and they'll get you in touch. I want to be a resource here in Caledonia and the school that I love, where my kids are. And so don't be shy. There's nothing you could ask me that I haven't heard. No situation too horrible or weird or whatever it is. You can't embarrass yourself in front of me. Trust me. So just reach out.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Chris. We are indeed very lucky to have each one of you that are on the panel tonight living Well, other than Katie, who lives in Arizona. I heard that you were originally a Michigander, but now you live in Arizona because you're lucky. But we are lucky to have each of you living in our community. And this is, we have a question that Dr. Martin, that came from the chat, that Dr. Martin is going to answer at the end. But before we go, Dr. Steenwick, I was wondering if you would share a couple of the, I know that Pine Rest has recently started offering some access to therapeutic tools in a group setting that might be a little bit more accessible for families. Could you share a little bit about some of those groups that are offered through Pine Rest?
Sure. Not a ton specifically for families per se, but we have different groups for the parents could be involved in, that kids could be involved in. One of the main groups that I run is called the Healthy Living Group, and that's a great group to be involved in for folks that are just wanting to get some additional support and be around other people that kind of understand struggles with depression and anxiety, and also learn some tools, some of the things that I talked about and things that have been out there already. Other people have mentioned in terms of like, taking care of ourselves with diet and exercise and sleep and having a healthy relationship with difficult thoughts and feelings and those sort of things. And we have healthy living groups for adults and for adolescents. So 13 and up are accessible for those groups. We do have a variety of DBT-based programs as well. So I talked about the TIP skills earlier. And so those are skills that are taught in not only our comprehensive DBT program, but also in something called our dialectical skills group, which is kind of just a program that's intended to provide kind of teaching of these really important skills for emotion regulation and developing a thriving life. So those are a few of the groups that we're offering. And we're always kind of thinking about different ways of helping and people connect with resources that will be valuable education and support for people. So definitely want to be able to be a resource to the community. And the clinic that I work at is right here in the Caledonia Clinic. And so definitely Pine Rest is committed to being a resource for this community as well.
And we will be sharing the details about what Dr. Steenwick talked about what Chris McKenna talked about, Catherine and Katie in our FAQs. So if you're like wondering where are the links and how do I navigate to these websites, we will share all of that with you afterwards. So that way you don't have to look around for it too hard. But with that, we did have a question come up in the chat, and Dr. Martin is going to address this for us. And it's, should the school provided devices have a supervisory app? And so just going to turn that question right over to Dr. Martin.
Yes, with our school provided devices, we have a lot of things already in place with various firewalls, limiting or preloading what apps students may need on their devices. So while we're not perfect, we're certainly always interested in finding more ways to keep our kids safe in an online environment. I think the reason why I wanted to do this tonight, and I would say maybe 90% of or even 95% of the things that we see are more so students on their own personal devices, because that's not something that we can put up firewalls or regulate. And that is by and large where the biggest challenges come from. So that's why we wanted to kind of work with and partner with and educate parents in the community about, what to be aware of and what to look out for. And so that's why we're happy to have some of these expertise here. But having a child in the system myself and having my child use district devices is something that I am keenly aware of as a parent. Not to say that we don't have some industrious kids who can't maybe find a way around something here and there. That always happens. And when we find that out, we shut it down quickly for all kids. But by and large, the school devices are pretty safe. It's the personal devices that becomes the bigger challenge that we want to make people aware of.
Thank you so much, Dr. Martin. That's really helpful. And I know that anytime we can add layers of protection here at the school, we do. And I know that our technology department works really hard to make sure that our students are safe with their school provided devices. So with that, we are going to officially conclude our evening. I just want to encourage the parents that are on tonight just to know that no matter where you find yourself right now, that there is always a way forward. And we are so fortunate to have such amazing resources in our community, to live in a smaller community outside of Grand Rapids and have these agencies and people who live here and have their students go to school here and are invested in our community. We are really fortunate. So please reach out. You aren't alone. Together, I think that we have what we need to help our students to really be able to thrive. So thank you for joining us tonight. And please feel free to reach out to me if you have more questions that you think about later on. And again, we're going to share all of the resources that were presented tonight in an FAQ document. And we just thank you so much for your time. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone. Thank you. And thank you to the panelists once again.
Yes.
Yeah.
My pleasure, Dr. Martin. Take care.